Well, hello, my UPHUG minions. All right, we are going to crank out a little bit more notes. A little something for your long weekend. I'm not going to take you too far, but would like to get through the second agricultural revolution, and then I think the third one. Pretty much, we're going to see if we can grind out part one, and then we start really getting into the weeds with this unit. Get it? Weeds. Never mind. All right, let's get going here. All right, so second agricultural revolution, the year span that you get there, okay? And so usually it's going to be described as kind of an 18th and 19th century phenomenon. Um, Take some AP World History with me. You'll get a little bit deeper into this. What you'll learn is that what's going on during that same time frame is something that comes to be known as the Industrial Revolution. Matter of fact, here I'm going to just jump right in from A to B because the two are pretty linked. Okay, this idea of mechanized agricultural production. You go before the 1700s, and agricultural production is pretty much always going to be revolved around being powered by either humans or animals. Okay, there's not really any quote unquote machines that have been developed yet. And that's where we're going to see this real explosion in the late 1700s and then going into the 1800s and right up to into the 20th century, 1900s. So the Industrial Revolution usually does refer, and there's several industrial revolutions, just like there's several agricultural revolutions. We'll pick that apart later. Matter of fact, our last unit, okay, we'll drill a little bit deeper into the Industrial Revolution. See another connection there. Seed drillers. Driller? No, again. It's late, folks. Just get used to it. This is the way I'm going to probably be. So, yeah, the Industrial Revolution, it's a time when people start to figure out how to build machines. First, it's using hydropower to power machinery, and then the real explosion is with the invention of the steam engine. And that's going to open the door to factories that are producing textiles and iron and those kinds of things. And a lot of what they're going to be producing, as well with all these other innovations and kind of modern conveniences for their time, is they're producing a lot of farming equipment, which would make perfect sense. It was a time when still a lot of people farmed. The majority of people were farmers, and so to take that iron production and produce steel plows. The seed driller was a machine that would basically, instead of having to go through and hand kind of poke holes in the ground and drop seeds in them, this was a device that would do the whole job for you. It would drop these little spokes would come down and drop a hole. You could set it to 4 inches, 6 inches, and at the same time, it would drop a seed in that hole. So when it came planting time, boom, it could do the work of many, many men in a very short amount of time. Harvesters there are mentioned to big, get a big mechanized tractors that would be developed in the mid and later 19th century, and these two to just make the whole the physical labor and chore that goes into farming far easier. Okay, so again, all of it kind of tied together, A and B, with this idea of mechanized agricultural production. The effects of all this, well, let's talk about it. The number one effect is on a topic we've already talked about way back in Unit 2 when we learned about population. And this is where we see this big increase, like it says there, in food supply, as machines make it easier to mass produce farming and turn farming into big business over time. It's going to, basically it's going to make it easier and cheaper to produce food. And by doing that, you are going to see population growth just really begin to explode. There you go. Matter of fact, look at the little graph here. That's about the time of the Industrial Revolution. And whoo, right? Which is why goofy old, Mr. Malthus over there was predicting the end of the world. He's looking at, increased food supply, but he's also looking at a population boom that in his eyes, remember, was going to outstrip that food supply. He just did not have enough faith in humanity and to realize that, we would come up with solutions to that. And, well, yeah, shame on you, Malthus. Yeah, go away. All right. Number 2, we also have kind of as a subset of the Industrial Revolution is also kind of a revolution in medical science. And people are starting to understand a lot of different things about what works against lifespan, what works for it, but you're also getting just advanced medical techniques. The 19th century will be a time when surgical techniques will be perfected. People have a better understanding of the transmission of disease and how to prevent it. And so we're going to see that impact as well. All is kind of an offshoot of that industrial revolution and all part of the second agricultural revolution. So we see not only this population boom, but now people are living longer. Okay, not as long as they live now, but compared to going back to the mid, going back like 1500s, going back to the Middle Ages, and back there, oh yeah, definitely seeing where we start turning the corner on infant mortality rates not being as bad, all that kind of stuff. Okay. All right, and then urbanization, which will be our next unit. Okay, we'll really dig into this, and this is another impact of the Industrial Revolution that falls within our agricultural revolution, and that is the fact that as you start to see farming turn into more of a business, it's going to end up forcing a lot of small-time farmers out of the job. Okay. If they're trying to do it for subsistence farming, farming a little bit to feed themselves and then some extra to maybe sell at local markets, they're going to find that they can't sell it cheap enough to compete with what's coming out of these big farms that are using now all this mechanized production techniques. And so for many of them, they can't afford to be a farmer anymore. So what do? Well, they head to the cities, because in the cities there's all these factories popping open that are building all this stuff, and they migrate to the cities for basically for job opportunity, that sort of thing. And so that will lead to this big push in what we call urbanization. And that is the idea of people living within and right around big urban areas, big cities. Okay, and that is another thing that just, again, another kind of a natural consequence of this. Number 4 is a little bit more specific to England. Okay, but will also have its impact. In England, for centuries, they had these areas of England that were called commons. And commons were these big tracts of land that really didn't technically belong to anyone. And so anyone could farm on them. And a lot of times the people who were farming on them were very poor people who couldn't afford to own their own land. And so they would have this little patch in a commons that they would use for farming, and then it would get kind of passed on in a way. I mean, it didn't really belong to them, but they'd used it, and it was kind of like tradition, and everyone understood, oh, okay, well, that little hunk of land over there belongs to the Joneses, even though it doesn't really legally belong to them, but people respect it, kind of a thing. And so it went like that for years and years and years. Well, by the time you're getting into the 18th century and into the 19th century, there's going to be a lot of people in England said, actually, wouldn't it be better if someone just owned that land? And the government stepped in and began doing just that. Started selling off the commons and selling them off to wealthy people, who then did, like you see in the picture there, started fencing and walling off their land, what they're called, they're enclosing their land. Okay, and the Enclosure Act was this law, or set of laws, really, you could call it the Enclosure Acts. Sometimes you'll see it referred to as the Enclosure Movement. And it really was. It was this process of all of these poor farmers being pushed off their land that they had farmed for generations sometimes. And a lot of them are likewise going to end up, scooping up there to number 3. Another reason why you're going to have a lot of that migration to cities is because they have nowhere land to farm, and they can't afford to buy any land. And so it's to the cities they go to get a job in a factory. Okay? All right. Let's see, move over here. All right, so yeah, that covers us for the main points of the second agricultural revolution. So obviously, the big connector you want to be able to attach to the second agricultural revolution is the industrial revolution. Okay, it's kind of a one-on-one that kind of builds all in. All right, okay. Last section we'll cover here, third agricultural revolution, which takes us to the 1960s. That's my decade, or at least when I was born. To now, all right? And at the heart of the third agricultural revolution is something that comes to be known as the Green Revolution. Okay, and we'll break it down as far as exactly what does it mean, Green Revolution. Of course, we can think about green as in the green of plants and the chlorophyll and all that sort of thing. And so, yes, that is a clue. Okay, the green is not a reference to Kermit, although come on, what we can't think of anything bad to say about Kermit the Frog. It's just he's Kermit. So what was the Green Revolution? Well, number one, after World War II, we're going to see this huge advance in science focusing on plant biology. Okay, we're going to find that the world undergoes another big push in growth after World War II. We can cover again some stuff that we covered back in Unit 2. Okay, we get a little cross section here of our units, and scientists, as the population begins to grow again after World War II, and really starting to take off in some parts of the world, Asia, Africa, some of those areas. Scientists step in to see, what can science do to improve plants, crops, things like that, and how can science make plants that are maybe a little bit more like resistant to certain kind of plant diseases, maybe plants that are a little bit hardier, even though they don't get a lot of water. So you have scientists who are starting to kind of almost deal with the genetic makeup of plants. We'll see a lot of that going on. That all gets in that biology, understanding a little bit more about the plants, and then how humans can influence the development of plants and creating hybrids and things like that. Okay, I'm probably getting ahead of myself with some of this. Matter of fact, there I am. So this is the goal of the Green Revolution. High yield just means that seeds that produce a lot of crops. Where we don't have a lot of a high rate of seed failure, where the seed doesn't germinate and grow. It's production of seeds that are pretty potent. They're definitely the odds are that they're going to grow and they're going to be produce very healthy plants. So when we have that going on, where the crops are abundant and that sort of thing, that is high yield. Okay, it's just got a lot of plants, a lot of crops. Disease resistant, scientists kind of dabbling with how to make certain kinds of diseases. Some of them that kind of cause like a fungus on leaves. Some of them that will kind of almost like a burn that will happen to plants. All kinds of different diseases, red thread, just all kinds of stuff that can happen to plants. And so, trying to create plants that can just by their very nature can resist some of that, right? And then crops that grow faster. All right, and we'll get a little bit deeper into that here in a few moments. But some of the big crops that you see there, rice, wheat, grain, these have been historically, this is what feed a lot of people. And so try to figure out how to apply these high yield, disease resistant and ways that you can get these crops to grow as quickly as possible. All part of the Green Revolution. All right, double cropping. Hold on about that. Had to respond to a text. Double cropping. No, it's not planting crops on top of each other. It's just a reference to the ability to plant multiple different types of crops, maybe on the same farm, on the same piece of land. Just being able to kind of widen out the variety of crops that are being grown. And traditionally, a lot of times on farms, you're just going to have acres and acres and acres of one crop. All right, maybe they're just growing nothing but wheat. Maybe massive paddies that grow rice. That kind of a thing. Double cropping is just like I said, it's picking 2 or 3 different crops that need the same kind of amount of water, the same amount of daylight, and those kinds of things. Shared growing conditions. And being able to do that to kind of expand on and a little more variety there. Okay, also kind of a little element there of the Green Revolution. All right, next one, the development of fertilizers and pesticides. You go back before the Green Revolution, and fertilizers were typically natural fertilizers. A lot of times animal dung. Okay, poop. and spreading that around. And it's an excellent fertilizer. It definitely makes the soil all the more kind of fertile and good for growing crops in. Pesticides, and sorry, with the green revolution is going to come the idea of chemical fertilizers, right? And so scientists will develop fertilizers that can either be sprayed or can be in the form of, like a powder or pellets that absorb into the ground and deliver, vitamins, nutrients, nitrogen, things like that stimulate crop growth. Okay, that kind of a thing gets the plants to grow faster. All right, pesticides are for killing pests. All right, and so a lot of times there are going to be certain types of insects that will infest and can destroy entire crops. Everything from grasshoppers to little boll weevils and all kinds of little critters. And pesticides. Back in the old days, pesticides didn't really exist. A lot of times they just use smoke to try to kill those kind of pests, those kind of insects, and try to smoke them out to a point where it didn't kill the plants but killed the pesticides. With the Green Revolution, we're going to see the development of a lot of chemical pesticides, including some that very controversially end up not only killing the pests, but having a lot of really ill effects on humans as well. Fertilizers and pesticides are a couple areas where there's been some controversy down through the years because there have been charges at times that either of those or both of those sometimes have caused harm to humans, especially on the pesticide side. Some of the chemicals that are used, in small amounts might not impact a human, but over the years, as it builds up within a body, it can be toxic, and there's been connections to type of cancers and things like that. So always kind of a tricky area there, but one that a lot of farmers definitely make use of, in order to keep their crop safe and be able to harvest their crop. All right, hybrids. There we go. I think I mentioned that one before. And that is this concept of breeding plants, crossbreeding plants, and like I said, almost kind of creating new crops, new plants out of other breeds that already exist. And so when I talk about the superior variations, this goes back to what we have up here on number 2, all right? And a lot of hybrids of what have been developed to try to achieve that goal of high yield, disease resistant, fast growing. Okay, but that really is just kind of your little short and sweet little definition for what a hybrid is going to be in our use here. All right, in our third agricultural revolution, GMOs, genetically modified organisms. Yeah, write it down. Okay, genetically modified organisms. I think it is also on the vocab sheet. Speaking of which, some of these other terms I've been throwing at you. Okay, double cropping, hybrids. You want to know those, and I don't think that those are necessarily on the list, but still terminology that I probably could have just as well thrown in there. So GMOs, genetically modified, it's exactly the way it sounds. This is where scientists have been able to literally get into almost kind of like, almost like the DNA of a plant and figure out how to, again, achieve that goal back up there at number 2. Okay. And so, when we talk about these modern improved seeds that achieve those goals in number 2, a lot of those have been created in a lab by scientists, and gets again into another area of some controversy. There's some people who and will present evidence. They're not just necessarily making this stuff up out of thin air. Where some of those GMOs might have unintended consequences on humans. In a way, because the Green Revolution is still relatively new and is still ongoing, all of us, you and me, are kind of like guinea pigs in a way for some of what has been produced when it comes to the foods that we eat. And GMOs are one of the examples of You know, some of what is very commonplace in a lot of the food that we purchase now. Now you will occasionally, and actually in the last few years, seeing more and more packaging on food that states that they make no use of GMOs, and they put that right there on the label because they know that there are a lot of people who are now specifically seeking out food that does not use these genetically modified organisms. They want food that is, you know, kind of in its original form, not messed around with by scientists and that sort of thing, because there is some evidence out there that you know, that this could, over the long stretch, end up having some real medical and health impacts on humans. You know, one of the areas they talk about is that you know, that even young people seem to be maturing, physically maturing faster in the 21st century than they were even just 50 years ago. And people look to, you know, the change in diet that has occurred in the last 50 years, and to a certain extent they look to some of the elements of the Green Revolution to say that, you know, hey, while there's been a good side to this, you know, in terms of producing more food to keep up with a rapidly growing world population, there might be a downside to all that in terms of what it does to us as humans. Okay, you know, the earlier development, what is that going to look like in another 50 years? You know, who knows? All right, that is that. All right. And then further mechanization of farming. Oh my goodness, yes. You know, nowadays we have farms that are almost completely run by computerized mechanical machinery, where only necessary, you know, for some humans to be around to make sure that the machines are running right and to, you know, hit the start and stop button, things like that. It's crazy the way that some of the large commercial farms, in other words, farms that are owned by big businesses and are, you know, totally in it for pure profit, to, you know, to make food to be sold in grocery stores and that sort of thing. And so we've seen, you know, the continuing improvements going all the way back to the Industrial Revolution. They keep happening even as we speak, and making food production easier and all that sort of thing. Okay, so we'll finish off by some quick pros to the Green Revolution. It has accomplished its goal of producing more food. You know, we talk about, you know, the 8 billion mark on this planet, yet you don't hear everyone running around saying, you know, oh my God, we're running out of food. You know, I know we have the Malthusians out there, but, you know, they don't get a whole lot of traction because, you know, it seems that we do have enough food. And when we do hear about areas that, you know, that are lacking food, it's not because we don't have the food to feed them, it's access issues. Either they're people who are caught in war situations, things like that. But the bottom line is the Green Revolution has achieved one of its main goals in producing more food. Okay. And although right now the times we're living in here, post-pandemic, still dealing with, I don't know whether to call it corporate greed or I don't know where to place it, but you know, food prices went up during the pandemic, and a lot of that had to do with supply, and having some issues with some of the food supply, with what we call the supply chain, kind of breaking down, and they are only very, very slowly coming down, even though, you know, the pandemic is over. If we look at the last 50 years in general, we have seen here in the United States and many other parts of the world, on the whole, we watched food prices drop down lower and lower. Okay, like I said, we'll make a little exception, a little cutout for where in the times we're living in right now, and what we're experiencing in the United States. Trust me, almost every country around the world has experienced it. To some extent, we are recovering a little faster than other parts of the world coming out of that pandemic. But obviously, we still have parts of our economy that are impacted, and unfortunately, food is one of those. Okay, but if we look big picture, okay, keep it big picture. Yeah, we're in better shape there. All right, and then the cons is where we'll wrap things up. There are environmental costs to this. You know, as we've seen even further mechanization of farming, you know, just and most of the farming equipment, although we're starting to see a little bit more and more use of green technologies on farms. And so, a little bit more use of hybrid farming equipment, but most of it is still kind of like the tractor you see over there on the right side, belching that really healthy looking black smoke into the skies so that we can all breathe it. We still also have some parts of the world that do a lot of that slash and burn type farming to produce land that they can apply some of those green revolution concepts. But, in the process of doing so, they're creating even more air pollution. And just the fact, the little gas can reminding me that, most farming equipment still makes use of good old fashioned fossil fuels very slowly, but we are starting to see some inroads in terms of the use of electrical farming equipment, non-traditional and not necessarily all fossil fuel based. And then, another down one. And again, I'll make this part quick because I've been talking to you about it as we've been going along. Fertilizers and the use of fertilizers and pesticides is just so commonplace now. And it's another one where, it's to a point where you will sometimes see food that advertises not only, that they don't make use of GMOs, but that they avoid chemical pesticides. To let a consumer know, hey, you might have to pay a little bit more for this, but you can be rest assured that there's nothing, it wasn't produced with any, modified organisms, and it's not soaked in what some people say is just poison, in terms of pesticides. And so, unfortunately though, kind of dark side of the green revolution is that to produce all this food, to keep up with the population and not put ourselves in a crisis situation, the use of those fertilizers and pesticides, chemical fertilizers and pesticides, is very, very commonplace these days. All right. And then last but not least, benefits not even for men and women. What I mean by that is that we see that that in many, especially less developed parts of the world, that women end up doing a lot more of the agricultural work. And in some of those less developed parts of the world, men oftentimes are the ones that head off to cities to see if they can find work in manufacturing and things like that. And so we see women more often than not being, in these less developed areas, not being able to take advantage as much of the green revolution. And as you can tell from the picture there, the green revolution has not made it evenly to all parts of the world. It's definitely much more of a reality in highly developed countries, and not as much in less developed countries. And so we do definitely see it falls more on the shoulders of women in a lot of those less developed countries to do the farming, to keep a family fed, and then a husband a lot of times who was working from a city and not commuting, literally, maybe coming home when they have some days off, but then sending money home to help the family. Okay, and well, you just tying in with that. When I talk about less developed countries, or if I'm talking about just continents, then we can look at Africa, where the effects of the Green Revolution have been very slow to arrive, and it just kind of an unfortunate reality. A lot of Green Revolution is contingent on money and financing. Those scientists, they all worked for major labs, and they were financed to do all that. And then the equipment that are used on Green Revolution farms, these big commercial farms, there are millions and millions of dollars invested into the equipment that they're using. You go to a less developed country and there just isn't that kind of financial or economic infrastructure to help support that sort of a thing. And Africa, unfortunately, has taken more of a brunt in that. There's parts of Central and South America, likewise, that suffer with this, and there's some parts of Asia that do as well. Okay, some of those places where we tend to see, oh look, there's Africa, more of that tendency towards less developed. Okay, and boom, that's going to finish up part one. Okay, there's 3 parts to this unit, and that takes care of one already. All right, you're thinking this unit's going to fly by so fast. I'm going to say no, it's not, because the next 2 units get long. If you have any questions, save them for when we're back in class. Okay, I'm done, and I'm just in under 30 minutes. That was the goal. All right, guys, that'll cover us for now. Till I see you next time. Bye.